And with that, we are live for episode 142 of Trek Live. How you doing this morning, Dan?
Doing all right. Looking forward to talking to Trek.
Yeah,
sure.
me too. Me too. It's been a long week, I think, for both of us, and this is this is a nice little button to end it on. And yeah, it's been a while since we did a character spotlight. We've done a handful of these over the last maybe year and a half or so. We started doing these. We've done Trip Tucker, we've done Kess, we've done Dr. Pulaski. I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting. But I'm really eager to talk about Deanna Troi today. I think she's a unique character. 7 full seasons of Next Generation development, movies, a couple appearances in Voyager, and now an appearance in Picard. So it's like a long running, character who's been in a lot of Star Trek. But a lot to unpack, so I'm really looking forward to doing that with you this morning. But as we are one to do, rewatch recap. I know you've had a really busy week, so I have no idea. Are you?
I don't have anything to report.
Okay.
Shame me in the comments, but yeah, it's been a busy week for me. Hopefully, these next, coming weeks, I'll be able to jump back on the wagon and get some episodes watched because I do miss Deep Space Nine. So
there you go. I am moving along with my sort of double back repetitive TNG experience here. As if anybody's following me on Twitter, I tend to post a little video, usually of the teaser of the episodes as I go. Sometimes I'll ask a question. Oddly enough, I did the Royale yesterday, and I asked thumbs up, thumbs down. This is a super divisive episode, and that tweet blew up. That was like the busiest tweet I've had in quite a long time. Lots of feedback, and I was proved wrong. I put a poll up with just a simple thumb up, thumb down, 2 options for the Royale, and it's like 80% thumbs up. So my theory that go ahead. No, it just blew up my theory.
Which I saw that. I feel like going into that episode, I think it's changed in a lot of people's minds.
I think
feel
it
like
has.
In the past it's been really
maligned.
yeah. But now I think it's really growing on people, and which that might be a fun topic to do of episodes that have changed.
I feel like have changed the. Yeah, certainly. I know there are a handful that I feel like back in the day, from my perspective, at least when I was younger, and I didn't.
Or at least when I started, I was on Twitter for the first time and going through my rewatch. I remember seeing not a lot of love for that episode.
Yeah, it tends to fall towards the bottom of a lot of people's that I've experienced, at least in my time as a fan, like rankings or not so well reviewed, and it's kind of, in my mind, it's always been sort of like a cult favorite, like there's a body of people out there who think it's really cool, a lot of fun, appreciate the humor, the dark kind of wacky vibe that it gives off. But I mean, the overwhelming response from my little anecdotal tweet that polled a little percentage of the fan base on Twitter brought out a lot of positive thoughts and a lot of that kind of thing. Like it was like guilty pleasure. I like it. I know it's terrible on one hand, but I kind of appreciate it for what it is. There was a variety of reasons behind the thumbs ups when people gave reasons, but when I put that up, I was kind of expecting it to be not necessarily 50-50, but more in that range than I think the last time I looked at it. It was like 78, percent thumbs up. But I'm towards the end of season 2 of the Next Generation. I have like 3 episodes left. I watched Q Huey yesterday. That's obviously a classic. Pen Pals I really like for like a Prime DirecTV debate. Tough spot, one of those lose-lose situations we kind of talked about, and something we did a couple weeks ago. So really enjoying it. I'm finding this new method, like I talked about last week and probably the week before that, where I'm not necessarily writing like the reviews the old way and doing all that. A lot, very refreshing. I'm enjoying this rewatch a lot as of right now. I'm enjoying posting the little video and seeing what kind of, sometimes there's a whole lot of response like the Royale, and there's a big conversation that comes from it, and I feel like I learn something about the way people feel about an episode, and sometimes it's a lot more quiet. Not a whole lot of feedback, but that's great. That's cool. The ones that do kind of hit and generate a conversation are always enlightening and interesting to unpack. So I'm going to keep going. I'm getting close to season 3, which is where I stopped doing it the old-fashioned way on that very slow, glacially paced rewatch. So I'll be marrying up and kind of moving forward from where I was before pretty soon here, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I got TNG on the mind, and we're talking about Deanna Troi.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. You watched TNG not too terribly long ago,
Yeah.
and you've seen it enough times that I think we're both pretty comfortable talking about Deanna.
Yeah.
So, she's an interesting character for a lot of reasons. I think she's used in a variety of ways over the course of the show. I think her use in the show changes a great deal.
Yeah.
I think if you look at her in Encounter at Farpoint, and then you look at her, much later in the show through Nemesis and beyond, she's really evolved over the years. So when somebody mentions Deanna, for you, what kinds of things come to mind? Do you think it's a successful character? Do you think there are what's your overall just raw impressions of that character?
Overall impressions. I think this character goes just over a change over the course of the 7 years and plus into the movies. Early Deanna is a little bit different than season 6, season 7 Deanna. So it's interesting to be able to point out things where that character changes from season to season, which we'll probably talk about a little bit. But no, I really like her character. I think it's a character that I don't see in TOS. Like, I feel like there was a formula, but this was kind of a little bit branching out of that formula where not necessarily all these crewmen on the ship are officers and things like that. There's a little bit different style of character, so that's cool to see.
Definitely represents a role that we saw nothing of in the original series. And I think that's one of the things that I think maybe even more so years ago than now, that a lot of the pushback to Deanna came from such a radical choice compared to what we had in TOS. This psychiatrist on the bridge sitting next to the captain felt for some people kind of silly, kind of goofy. But even then, Gene Roddenberry, I think, if memory serves, thinking back to interviews I've read, pun intended, favorite episode, New Era Track. I use it more now because of it.
Self-plug.
Self-plug. Yeah. He thought that by the time we get that far into the future, that people's mental health will be as cared for and as emphasized.
Which is such a forward-thinking thing, because now it's
very much now. I think it was one of those things in Star Trek that was ahead of its time. I think the notion today, there's such an emphasis placed on taking care of each other's mental health and taking care of our own mental health, and having more awareness for mental health issues. And more acceptance of the fact that we all kind of have our own versions of mental health issues that we have to work through and battle. We all have something in various degrees. The idea of having somebody on the ship who has a prominent role, who specializes in these things and can counsel the captain and can be an advocate for the crew. On that front, was forward thinking, and I think it works better now than it probably did in 1987. I think people in '87 probably found it, maybe a little on the nose and a little silly, but it's interesting to go ahead. I'm sorry, I want to hear what you have.
But that's a great point though. Is she she was relied early? Troi was really relied on by the captain. He asked, do you sense anything from this, whatever. And then she was also involved in the staff meetings, Deanna, what are you getting from this? And she was really involved, but she also, I don't know if this could be way off, but, Picard asked her how the crew is doing. Like, she was that bridge, but not just with the crew, but with other, first contacts and other missions like that. So, she was really utilized in that way, which I felt was pretty fresh coming from TOS.
Yeah, I really like, the notion that she's a counselor. That evokes, mental health, a therapist, which she certainly has that, going on. She does that. There are countless scenes, especially as we get into the meat of the show, where, she's counseling a crewman and she's got an office and it's a nice, comfy, therapist office on the ship, and she's there are episodes that kind of lean on those things, but more interestingly to me, she's the captain's counselor. Like she's somebody who advises the captain in these difficult situations, and because she's empathic, she not only can detect things in through the emotions of whoever they're dealing with, whoever the sort of who's on the other side of the view screen this week. She can feel things on the crew. She knows how the crew is feeling.
Yeah.
She knows how the senior officers are feeling about things, and she can give the captain advice on how to proceed with all these things in mind. So to me, for all that, like, it makes sense that somebody in that position, especially somebody who's empathic, Betazoid, would sit next to the captain. I mean, I think there's, for good reason, the captain has her like right on his side, so he can just turn to her and say, "What do you think?" She has traits and skills that are of value to Captain Picard. And I also like, and I assume in my headcanon that not every ship, not every captain kind of situates the bridge the same way. Not every captain's going to choose to have the ship's counselor sitting next to them. But because Picard has Deanna and trusts Deanna, and Deanna has the skills that she has, that seat is taken up by her. Picard wants her there. Captain Jellicoe might not, or Captain Sisko might not lean so heavily on her. But it's a personality trait of Picard that is reflected in the way he commands, that he wants that. And I think Picard, even in Star Trek Picard, talks about talking about Data in like a completely unrelated scene, but he talks about one of the things Picard has in common with Data was the ability to express emotion, and to like they kind of had that in common. And so if Picard has kind of a blind spot for expressing emotion and dealing with emotion, and is more rigid and is more comfortable in a more like straight up, back up kind of rigid leader position, it makes sense that he would want somebody who covers that blind spot, and Deanna Troi better than Deanna Troi to offer that for Captain Picard.
Yeah, and she's so involved with the rest of the crew, not just the captain or Picard, but she has that great relationship with Riker. She helps Data. Same thing with Picard. She really helps him try to track down his emotions and stuff like that. The Worf thing is a whole deal as well. Yeah, she's really involved in not just Picard and the captain, but just also the rest of the senior staff, and I'm guessing probably the rest of the crew.
Absolutely,
she's in a really unique position where she gets to interact with it. Just in my head canon, she's really involved with everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. I think they do kind of sell that, especially as we get later into the show, that she's sort of, I think I used the phrase like the advocate for the crew, like for the lower decks folks. Like, she knows the crew emotionally, and she sort of there's that great scene in Lower Decks, the episode Lower Decks, with Riker and Troi sitting in 10 forward, like poring over crew evaluations. Like, it makes perfect sense to me that the first officer and the counselor are the ones who kind of sign off on these things and decide who gets promoted, and are kind of at the top of the food chain with the crew relations, like the HR kinds of.
Yeah, I was just gonna say she's also kind of like this HR rep type. Yeah,
and on a ship with 1,000 people on it, a ship like the Enterprise, that's a big job. There's all these divisions, there's all these specialized assignments, and allocation of resources is a thing, and it makes sense that there's a senior officer who is that and handles those things, and it makes sense to me that Deanna Troi is that person.
Sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but on the D, it's the crew complement is 1,000, but does that include civilians as well?
Well, that's always I don't know. I'll be honest. I feel like you hear in dialogue in TNG at a variety of times there's over 1,000 people on the ship, but because there are families, and civilian people who work in 10 forward,
Yeah.
crewman family people.
So it's
That
just not Starfleet crew
kids,
members. It's
yeah,
it's everyone. Yeah.
absolutely, and that's a whole
Yeah.
other job. Like Deanna is always involved in, especially as we get later into the show, and there's like Alexander's on the ship, and Alexander's going to
Yeah.
school. Deanna's
Yeah.
always kind of hanging around the schools,
Yeah.
the classrooms, and is aware of what's happening there. Has relationships with the teachers, and
Hmm.
again, that's important to me. Like because of the concept of this show and the ship, that it's this city in space where people live for long periods of time,
Yeah.
and it's a true community. There's got to be somebody who kind of bridges that gap between the civilian
Hmm.
side and what's going on in the day-to-day lives of the people living on the ship, and can funnel that information up to the leadership, Riker and Picard.
Yep.
And I think once the show sort of figures that out and gives Deanna something more to do besides some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, where she's sitting next to the captain and she says
Yeah.
that Ferengi is, not trustworthy on the other side of the
Yeah.
screen in season one, uh,
Yeah.
with her goofy hairdo and
Yep.
denim black uniform. Once they kind of mature the character and they find a voice for her and refine her look, I think they really hit, a lot of things squarely on the head, with giving that character a unique voice and a well drawn job. I wish they would have done more with it. And I wish more was like clearly articulated on screen. I think the character would be
Hmm.
more appreciated maybe if those kinds of things were leaned into more, as opposed to people like us who really live and breathe this show, maybe jumping to some conclusions and doing some headcanon drawing to like map it
Oh
all
yeah.
out and make it all make
Yeah.
sense. Um, but it's certainly there for people like us, and I think
Hmm.
by season 7, certainly the character has really grown into those kinds of roles, and that's what's most interesting about her to me, like that crew relations and
Yeah.
even like first contact specialist, sort of like I'm thinking of episodes like First Contact where they're dealing with actually conducting a first contact mission.
Hmm.
Um, she's certainly on the forefront of that episode, I believe, with dealing with
Yeah.
the head of state and right on Picard's flank as they're kind of making contact for the first time. Like she's somebody Picard leans on in those kinds of situations too.
Do you have a favorite um, Deanna Troi episode or moment that you want to kind of talk about or highlight?
Um, Favorite episode.
I think
Yeah, you go ahead.
I think one of her like strongest is Face of the Enemy,
Yes,
but she also has great moments or things that aren't necessarily a Troy episode.
right.
So Thine Own Self, I think,
That's a
is
huge one. That was on the
is
tip of
one.
my tongue.
Yeah, and she's working to become like an
A
officer
full
or
commander.
bridge, yeah, commander.
Hmm.
And the A plot or whatever is it's kind of forgettable. But the
Hmm.
other where she's working with Riker
Yeah,
in the holodeck, whew, that's some cool interactions.
yeah.
That,
I don't know that it's the best Troy episode, because it's a
no,
B
no,
plot. Although it is, I think, the thing that I remember most about that episode. It's the most distinctive thing about it, and I think if we're talking just like what's the peak, you know, use of that character, it might be that. I think because it's so late in the show and we've seen her grow so much. In the 6th season, Jellicoe kind of dresses her down and makes her wear a uniform. He kind of looks at her and goes, "What are you doing wearing this?" Like, I expect people on the bridge to be, dressed in Starfleet uniform and not in her more casual kind of, um, clearly othered attire. So I think. I think seeing the character evolve to a point where she's aware of her limitations and wants to be taken more seriously as like a command officer, like and she references like in the season finale premiere of 6-7, Crusher's in command of the bridge during a crisis and is like dealing with the Borg and Descent. And I think she even cites that, like, that rubbed off on her, and she was like, if Dr. Crusher could do it, I need to do it. I need to go through this. And I think the way Riker handles that is impressive too. Um, it's
because
so
she has to like send Jordy into like a dangerous area,
yeah.
or he potentially, yeah, it's just like a tough command decision, but
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. She has to order somebody essentially to their death, and
Yeah.
that's the big step that kind of separates. Is this job for you? If you can't get there, if you can't pull the trigger to save your ship by ordering a friend to maybe lay down their life, you probably need to not get in that chair because you're inevitably going to be put in a position like that at some point. You're going to have to agree or make a decision that's going to put somebody in harm's way. Um, and Troy's journey to get there, and it's led up to well. You have chain of command where she's dealing with Jellicoe, and Jellicoe, forces her to kind of self-reflect on her role in the bridge and the way she presents herself in these situations. And then even before that, in season 5, there's a disaster, which is they hit that sort of natural phenomenon in space, and it's like an earthquake hits the ship, and everybody's fractured off in their own sections, and she's on the bridge and in a position to take command. And she's not totally comfortable with it. She's leaning on junior officers like Rowe and O'Brien, who happen to be on the bridge, and is put in these positions to have to make these kinds of decisions. And she's kind of she does it, and she does it well at the end of the day. But she has to fumble through it. She's not entirely comfortable in that position. So it's the breadcrumbs are there throughout the show that lead her to that decision. And I think because that happens so close to the end of the show, it really does like draw out a pretty succinct arc for her. When you look back at Encounter at Farpoint and some of those early season 1 episodes, and then think of her in Thine Own Self or in Face of the Enemy, which I think is probably the best episode that heavily features her, that the A story is driven by her. Even in that, she's in this, pretty tough situation. She's like having to play Romulan.
Situation. Yeah.
With Tal Shiar, like the hardcore Romulan, like secret police. She's got to go toe to toe with these people and not break. That's not a comfort zone for her. So with episodes like Disaster and that and Chain of Command, she really does get an opportunity to grow. And in Generations, even she as the ship is kind of getting taken down, the helmsman gets like blown away, and Riker puts her on the helm, and she's driving the ship in this battle situation that is the end for that ship. You have to think that without those kinds of experiences, she's probably not running up to that helm station and driving the ship in a battle with the Klingons.
Yeah, exactly.
So even into the first movie, there's that growth that feels really natural and well done.
Yeah.
But I do think if you look back at the early part of the show and that first part of season 1, which I watched not too long ago, there are moments where I don't think they quite know what to do with her. I think when you have a character who's telepathic or empathic, I think they like to resist the word telepathic. Like she doesn't easily communicate with everybody without speaking. She can with other Betazoids like her mother. But it kind of becomes a dramatic crutch for some situations to have that person who has that kind of easy fix. And there are episodes where she's kind of conveniently absent, where having somebody who might be able to read somebody's mind or unlock a problem for Riker, it's
would
easier to
easily solve this situation.
Yeah, she happens to be off the ship on some conference or something, or later on they do a better job of creating situations that don't lend themselves to easy fixes for her, and they have more of a feel for how to use her traits as a character. Anything else stand out for you from just overall impressions?
No, I really like the arc. Like you said, I think once she puts a uniform on, I definitely, it's really cool to see that character really evolve, especially the later half of the seasons, like you said. So, I think it's easy to, just kind of put her in a box with, she's the empath that, has a thing with Riker. But I really think there's some really good meat on the bones there. That was good stuff, good television.
Definitely, yeah. I think you just said it. You said it early too, and it is. I think one of the unfortunate things about her character, and Crusher suffers kind of the same fate a little bit. Um, you know, I think for a lot of people, the easy thing that kind of comes to mind when you think of Deanna Troi's relationship with Riker,
Yeah.
and you know, I think we did a good job of kind of covering all the things we love about the character that's independent of that sort of will they, won't they, up and down. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold.
Yeah.
Dynamic with Commander Riker. But that it's kind of impossible to talk about Deanna without covering that.
Yeah.
And whether or not it's a positive or a negative is kind of up for debate. I mean, I think there's a lot of realness in, you know, the slow burn kind of relationship.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I really think I really think it's a friendship thing. I think that's kind of the feeling I get early on. Like they've got this history, obviously, but yeah, there's some good friendship stuff too. It's not just all romantic stuff, which I think adds to the slow burn.
I kind of like the fact that it's complicated and it is a slow burn. I think, like you said, there are episodes like, The Price, which is not a favorite of either one of us, I don't think. But I like the fact that this character starts a relationship with Troi for kind of devious reasons, I think, and is kind of a scumbag for a variety of reasons, but thinks he's kind of getting one over on Riker, and thinks he's kind of getting in Riker's head by doing this, and Riker kind of shoots him down and says, "No, you don't get it at all. Like, at the end of the day, we're friends, and if you make her happy, then..." Like, he's got that really good monologue at him in 10 Forward, where he kind of dresses him down and says, "You know what the hell you're talking about. Like, this is more complicated than you have any idea. We're completely comfortable with our dynamic. And you're not, and you can certainly debate, is Riker being genuine there or not? Like, is there actually Bruce feelings? The way Frakes plays that scene lends itself to
interpretation. For sure.
Yes. Yeah. But I like that. I think that it's complicated, and I think that's real. That there is this deep history, and there were choices made in their younger lives that led to some bruised feelings and made it complicated, and that it wasn't just a light switch flick on moment when they got onto the ship and it was like, okay, we're back, and we're going to be together, and there are like moments of that, but it's not as simple as that.
Which really plays into the workplace drama-esque type of things in that, because like if we look at other workplace dramas, we have things like that, and I think it's a very dramatic
100%
thing that happens between these two.
Yeah.
That I think plays into that workplace drama.
Absolutely. Nothing new for shows that do that.
Yeah.
That try to convey that sort of dynamic, that workplace situation.
Yeah.
That will they, won't they is certainly not new.
Nope.
But I like that they get there. I like the way that they get there. I think that it's kind of always bubbling beneath the surface. I think there are so many scenes that I think because those two actors don't let it die, they kind of, whether it's a scene in the observation lounge or on the bridge, like they just exchange a look that is just a little more loaded than two just fellow officers would exchange. That it kind of keeps it burning a little under the surface and allows the growth to happen when it ultimately does, and makes it satisfying when it actually does consummate into a more formal thing. In Insurrection and in the Nemesis, and now we see it in Picard, where they're together for the long haul now. So the Riker dynamic, I think it's unfortunate that it becomes, I think, the sort of crutch that defines her character in the minds of some.
I hate that.
But it's not fair, and I don't think it's maybe the show could have done a better job for sure of diversifying the character and using the character in ways that are beyond. Like, I think they do kind of fall into this pattern of Deanna Troi episodes like The Price, there's another one, Man of the People, Violations. Like, there's sometimes like these relationshipy, like she's in a love story with somebody Haven. I think going to that place lends itself to the Riker dynamic being looked at. And I wish there were more episodes like Thine Own Self and Disaster and Face of the Enemy, so that maybe that's not the thing that pops to mind so prominently.
Well, and I think it's how the characters kind of bookend, especially with the movies. Like they end with them getting together in the movies and stuff like that. It's the same with Enterprise. It's this ending puts a bad taste in your mouth, and it leaves you to.
No, that too. That it does end with that.
Yeah. But I really think I do it too sometimes. I just gotta really focus and remember that she has a really great arc. The latter half of the seasons. So,
agreed. Ian is in the room and said, "Hey guys, it's been a while since I've been to one of these." Yeah, good to see you, Ian. He said that the best Troi is post Jellicoe, sort of after the uniform
on.
Yeah, once the uniform goes on, I think that sort of does create it creates a shift in the character. I think that is welcome.
Yeah. Which is so cool because I think when I think of characters, I really think they're very well established, at least that latter half of these last 2 seasons in their respective shows.
Yeah.
But it's really cool to see that they're still working with arcs and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the fact that Troi is so strong, I think, in the back half of the show is a sign that the arc works. I think that they're not kind of just running on fumes with the character, and the character's not just in their way and doing what they do, and kind of one more story that's kind of in the box that the stories about that character tend to be in. Like her character's growing all the way to the end with episodes like That in itself. And I think the actress is underrated. I think she's really good. I think, especially given some of the difficult things she has to do with, speaking with a slightly exotic accent that is kind of an offshoot of her own. Like she has this Mediterranean Greek. She's Greek, Marina Sirtis. So she has an accent coming in, but she certainly extenuates it, and especially in the early seasons. She speaks with a heavy accent that kind of gets numbed as the show goes on, thankfully. It's a tough role. She's got to be. She exudes that empathy. Surrounded by these strong male characters, really on the bridge, who have these archetypal, set things that have very in your face traits, and Deanna's much more quiet and laid back, and but no less prominent, and she goes toe to toe.
She's got to balance out. Yeah, she's got to balance that out.
She does, and a lot of her best scenes are with Patrick Stewart. She has some great stuff with, I think, in Generations. The one of the things that a lot of people can kind of take or leave from that movie is the sort of miserable Picard having lost his brother and his nephew, and Picard's in this really vulnerable, damaged place for a lot of that movie. But I think maybe her best scene in all the movies is sitting in the observation lounge with Picard, or I think Picard's quarters actually. Looking at the family album, and Picard's kind of telling her what happened, and Troi is doing what Troi does, but she's acting with Patrick Stewart on the big screen in an emotionally heightened, important moment to define this character for this movie, and she's right there with him, and is really strong. She gives a complicated performance all the way through the show, and. I never feel like she's one note. I always feel like there's always things going on beneath the surface, whether it's with Jonathan Frakes, with Riker, multi-layered kind of things happening that aren't necessarily on the page with the way she's relating to him, either directly in a scene or just kind of in the background on the bridge, or in a more prominent way. I think she's really good. And you kind of you mentioned it early that she's got strong relationships with multiple characters. Like she relates to Data, she guides Data through his journey with understanding emotion, and
she's got the whole thing with Barclay. That's kind of a whole can of worms
that leads into Voyager. It continues on into Voyager.
Which that kind of leads into my next question. What is your thoughts on the use of the character not in the TNG setting. Post TNG, post the movies. She gets that cameo in Voyager. She's also in Picard, like you said.
She's an Enterprise.
Yeah, she's in Enterprise. Forgot about that.
Yeah. I like her in Voyager because Voyager does, I think, because of the way it uses Barclay as sort of a, if we're gonna explore the Earthbound side of things later in Voyager,
Yeah,
and they decide to use Barclay as kind of a recurring character, not as prominent a person as say like an Enterprise crewman from TNG. Like they find a character that they can kind of put into the show and be the sort of voice of Earth, trying to reach out to Voyager and working to connect with Voyager and have it not be like a new character, not having to build a new character. So if you're going to use Barclay and explore Barclay further, I think, like you said, because she does build a relationship with him throughout TNG and is helping him through his own struggles, and because Voyager chooses to kind of continue that story in an episode like Pathfinder, where he's kind of redescending back into some of those bad habits with the holodeck and becoming a little too obsessed and connected with, that world. It makes sense.
It feels like it. It makes sense. There. It's a natural, logical thing to just go that direction with her.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't have a problem with her in Voyager at all. I think the Enterprise situation is, we've kind of talked about that in other shows, but that's kind of a fiasco in my mind. That goes beyond. Yeah. It's not her fault by any means, but no. not the best choice for that moment in that show. And then in Picard, I think she was amazing in Nepenthe. I think she yet again has some scenes with Patrick Stewart. I think of that. Maybe my favorite moment in that episode is, I think, her and Kestra, their daughter, picking tomatoes or something in Picard. They're talking to Picard, and Deanna dresses down Picard about how he's dealing with Soji and not being the Picard of old necessarily, and how he's relating to her, and kind of checks it and pulls back the old Picard a little bit. So I think it's a mixed bag with Enterprise because that's its own brand of mistake, I guess. But I think she's well used in Voyager and in Picard. What about you? I mean, do you feel?
Yeah, I like I said, I think she's it's a logical choice, at least in Voyager. And in Picard, I think it was easy to do fan servicey things with that, at least those two characters. But I think both, she's really ingrained in Picard's life, so I think she fits right in Picard.
For sure.
So yeah, I think it's, and then Enterprise, again, is a fiasco and a half. So I'll maybe leave that for another day. But I think she's well used.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ian asks, "What do we got? What do we make of the fling with Worf at the end of TNG?" And that is, we've talked about it a couple of times. I have mixed feelings. I think kind of like the Seven Chakotay situation at the end of season 7. I do kind of feel this. It's hard to shake this feeling that they're kind of throwing whatever they can at the wall and seeing what they can do to ride out the show, create a new character dynamic. I mean, I think there's something to be said for like opposites attract. Who's a more opposite character from Deanna than Worf.
But I think I have less of a problem with it. I think it makes sense with Alexander, especially. I think she's. I think
they do build that a lot.
They build that up.
Seasons.
But also, I like the dating your best friend's like ex or something like that, and it's and they kind of play with that too as well. But I have less of a problem with it.
Yeah, I think it does lend itself to. I don't know if this is why they even. If it was like a. I don't know if it was sort of like a happy accident to. It may have been. No, you're fine. Yeah, it may have been a happy accident to create. Or if it was intentional, I don't know. But what it ended up doing was, in All Good Things, one of the sort of bittersweet threads that you get into the future storyline there is that Riker and Worf have had a kind of falling out, and it all kind of stems back to that choice that Worf and Troi make to move forward with that relationship. And something happens to Troi. We don't get a whole lot of detail, and it creates a real bitter ending for that friendship. And one of the things that kind of goes back pretty far, now that I'm watching season 2, they really do in season 2. I don't know if they follow through with it as much throughout the show, but they do start building toward this friendship between Riker and Worf. These two masculine guys who kind of bond over, exercising on the holodeck and these Klingon programs, and maybe Riker kind of guiding Worf a little bit.
And remember he asked him to I forget the episode.
Ethics. Yeah, asked him to kill him.
Yeah,
to help him commit suicide. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a friendship there that does, weave through the show fairly consistently, and to have it generate this falling out.
Peak performance, like he asked him to. Yeah, they build that up.
They do. In season 2, it's very much on the forefront. Very early on, they really do it a lot in season 2. Watching it right now, they're on missions often together, or they're on away teams together, and sometimes there's some jarring back and forth and poking at each other. They tied it. If it wasn't intentional, they tied it in well. Right, Ian. I think it may have been a happy accident to start the Worf Troi thing and then have it end with using it well in All Good Things. But I do think they used it well in All Good Things, and I think because of the way that Picard shares things that he saw in All Good Things with the crew, it kind of makes sense why maybe that Troi and Worf thing doesn't continue. Why kind of they pump the brakes on that once they maybe get some perspective on how things could proceed. So, yeah. Not typically well liked in the fan community, though. I don't think that particular relationship. I think that's kind of one that if you poll the masses, I don't think you'll get much love. But I don't think it's universal hate by any means. I think it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah. As is any topic in Star Trek.
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's truth.
Yeah.
Anything else on Deanna that kind of pops to mind for you?
Future of the character. Where do you think it's gonna go? Do you think we'll see her again? Do you think?
I do. I think we're gonna see more of her in Picard. I think, something tells me that we haven't seen the end of Riker or Troi in that show. What that means, who knows? But I would like to see more. I think because she's so good in that episode, I'm sure that might add some motivation to bring her back. She delivered the goods.
Yeah.
And I think, especially a show like Picard that deals so heavily with, sort of deep brooding, dark themes, emotional stuff, it kind of lends itself to...
She has to be there.
Exactly, yeah. It just kind of adds up and makes sense. So something tells me we'll see more. I don't know where she's going to go. I think we'll get more, hopefully, exploration of, what's been. I'd love to know a little bit more about what's kind of happened since they left the Titan and with the
I'd love a short trek, to be honest.
With Riker and Troi on the Nepenthe.
That's my kind of future. If I had the keys to the shop, or I could if I was a showrunner, I'd love to do a little short trek, but.
What kind of short trek would you want to see on Nepenthe before they get to Nepenthe, like with the young kids on the Titan, or some other adventure? Like what do you see? What would you like?
Yeah, I think I would like to see explain why we left the Titan, why that we're on this planet.
Right.
I think could be a really fun science, because why they're there is really a sciencey reason, but it's also it's really interesting to find that there's this parallel that Riker was such a career guy, and now we see him in Picard as this quote unquote settled, like he's a settled stay-at-home dad, which is really cool to see that yin and yang mirror of this character that's always been a career guy, and he finally
now that he has a family.
I love that. I love it.
That's a great call on Riker, especially to see when you think of it that way, how many decisions he's made kind of with his career in mind. But it always has kind of been blended. Like, by the time he gets to the Enterprise and he's around. Like you could certainly make a case that at the end of the day, if you got him, you know, being honest, maybe with a few drinks in him, maybe the reason he doesn't take commands on ships like the
because he
Melbourne,
was.
I think it's because of Deanna, more
Yeah,
than maybe.
yeah.
It's Picard and the Enterprise and being second in command on such a good shit like the flagship, and doesn't doesn't feel right to leave, and it's comfortable, and his gut tells him this is where he belongs. Like he articulates all those things, but I think the thing that's kind of like seeping beneath the surface of that is
Well, and I also think just because of his relationship with his dad, this is so headcanon. This is so far. We're so far from Deanna. Well, not so far, but to stay with Riker, I think he secretly wanted stability and to stay and to find a home.
Yeah.
Right, because he's always about this career officer. But yeah, I think you're right. It's probably Deanna, but also, at least in my head, he also really wants that stability and a place, a sense of feeling at home.
Because it's what he didn't have for sure.
That's what he didn't have with his dad. So I think there's that. That's why. That's another reason why he's passing up these commands and stuff. So, and then he inevitably says like, "Well, let's just, settle on this planet." So
right, but I think Deanna definitely offers him some perspective and helps center all these things. Like in the Best of Both Worlds, he's got that really good scene with Deanna while he's trying to make this decision about do I take command on Melbourne? Was it Melbourne? No, it was the. Yeah, I think it is Melbourne. Yeah, but he's offered a command again in Best of Both Worlds, and he's really weighing it, and he feels like this is kind of the last shot. Maybe if I say no again, who knows when they'll ever offer me one. But he really doesn't want to go, and he has this really good scene in 10 Forward with Troi talking about all the reasons to stay, and I think Deanna's kind of at the heart of those decisions for all the reasons you're saying. But I think Deanna maybe offers some comfort, perspective, and isn't a bad reason to stay in her own right. Because it's telling that when he finally takes a command, they're married and she's going with him. Like the one thing he's kind of taken with him to the Titan is Deanna Troi. So I think there's a lot of interesting things to talk about with Deanna. I think we covered a lot of them. But there's more. We could go on and on and on. We could go into episodes and individual smaller stories. But we mentioned a lot of episodes. We talked about the price. We talked about Face of the Enemy and that itself, disaster, a little bit of Generations even, as well as the other show stuff that we get later on. Any other episodes, other moments that kind of stand out to you, things that kind of pop into your mind when you think of her that might not even come in a true Deanna Troi episode as like highlights or well-pitched moments for the actress or the character?
No, I mean, I like the... I don't know. I just like the character. I like how it's really science fiction-y. How this species can, or she's half Betazoid, which she has empathic powers. I think that's really cool. We didn't really talk about her mother all that much.
Yeah, we didn't.
But that's another thing that comes to mind for better or for worse. When I think of that character. And we've established that she has a great arc.
It does, yeah, and you're so true. I mean, I can't believe we didn't mention Loxana in our conversation up to this point. But you got to talk about it for a second. And yeah, I mean, this is one of the few times that you get. I mean, we meet Riker's dad. I think we meet Geordi's father and mother, sort of. Father definitely through subspace communications in a season 7 episode. So,
I think a lot of the characters do have some family members. Yeah, stuff. I mean, Worf has his brother.
Yep. Picard has his brother.
Picard has his brother. Data has his brother.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Troi. I mean, Dr. Crusher has Wesley, of course, but the grandmother who was having a love affair with the. So everybody gets some love with their family, but no more than Deanna for sure. I mean that having that be a recurring character who's a big presence on that show. When you think of recurring characters in TNG, it's pretty much Q and Loxana as like you pretty much bank on once a season you're going to see them.
Yep.
And to some mixed results, and your mileage may vary because she's a very broad character, very very in your face tonally. The humor may work or it may not, depending on your perspective and your taste. Um, but it certainly put an impression on the show. Loaxana did, and it helps define Deanna's arc as well. Her kind of evolving relationship with her, and um, you know, getting to see her from that family perspective. We even find out later in season 7, the daughter in Picard is named after a sister that Deanna didn't even know she really had. It's like a sort of repressed memory situation, for Loaxana, and uh, family is certainly a big theme with Deanna. Having lost her father and having lost a sibling, and that certainly creates a unique bond with the mother, and maybe keeps the mother coming back and making appearances on the Enterprise to see Deanna. When you think about that, if you're Loaxana and you've lost your husband and your other child, you're gonna make your way to Deanna as often as you can, I think, and try to keep that relationship alive and burning in a positive way. And it's certainly a point of emphasis for that character, and it makes logical sense that she would do that.
Yeah.
Another little quick moment to kind of end on. I think the first time for me, now that I'm watching TNG kind of in a pretty succinct, rapid order here, I think the first time I take note of Deanna really firing on all cylinders is in the Arsenal of Freedom, which is I mentioned is an episode that maybe for the first time makes use of the entire ensemble in a pretty equal way. It's
Very
got
well.
Geordi's in command for the first time. He's still kind of a junior officer, but he's given this assignment to basically run the ship with other junior officers. And
is he still in red in that?
He's
episode?
Still in red. He's just the navigator, the helmsman.
Yes.
But sort of the whole crew is pretty much down on the planet, dealing with this crisis of the week, sort of on Minos. But Geordi's kind of struggling through his first command, and kind of relating to these younger officers who are raw and green and are in the most intense situations they've been in their careers, and trying to relate to them. And there's some really nice scenes with Deanna kind of counseling Geordi and giving him perspective and being that counselor, not just a mental health counselor for the crew, and working through people dealing with depression and anxiety and all the things that everybody deals with. Certainly carries weight, but it's just offering that career advice and that like practical day to day, like being a counselor, like an advisor, and kind of keeping whoever needs it in check and centered. That's the first time I think Deanna's really used in a way that echoes the way we're going to see, that character function best in the future. So. So to kind of wrap it up, we like her a lot. I think Deanna's a well-liked character here on Trek Live. I don't know that everybody feels the same way, although I do think I get the impression, kind of like the Royale, which we opened with.
Grown on a lot of people.
Grown on a lot of people. Yeah. Maybe different attitudes, different appreciation in 2020 than maybe in 1990 or even in 2000, perhaps. So, we're fans. I think she's a successful character. I enjoy her more every time I sort of go back to TNG and I see the different layers and the development, the arc. Final thoughts, takeaways?
It's funny though, because it's just where my head's at. I think as time goes on, are we gonna start liking Trek even more?
Of course.
Because we talked about at the top of the show, the Royale is changing, which I was positive to begin with.
Yeah, you've always liked
it. But also with Troi, I think there's some positivity that slowly grows. We talked about Enterprise. Some things obviously are positivity is growing with that. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's natural that as we age and go back to it over and over and over again, maybe some of the things that people were cooler on, might warm to with time and added perspective, fresh takes. Not everything, some things. And the children shall lead still sucks. Code of honor still sucks.
Yeah.
Not everything warms, but some things do, and perspectives uniquely, I think, can change. And we're all fans of this. If we're watching this, if anybody's watching this, if you're watching Trek Live, you obviously love Star Trek, and you have a reason to go back to it and reevaluate it, and you've seen it enough times to carry different life experiences into each time. It's kind of natural for, I think, some things to pop and maybe not have before, and things might have popped 5 years ago that might not pop as much now. So, I think that's Deanna Troi fits in that for me. I think even I like her now more than I did when I was younger. That's fair to say.
Yeah.
Other Trek content. Anything you want to throw a spotlight on?
Oh man, I do not have anything. I think I will just cheat and then reference. I think there was a new Trek Ranks. I've listened to part of it. It's the
Scenes on Earth, I think.
Scenes on Earth. Yep. Good stuff as always. So.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would. Trek Ranks is always a good one. A lot of good Lower Decks content out there. Like I mentioned last week, I really like Trek Central, who I think entered the room. I'm not sure if they're still hanging around. I don't know who that is. It might be Dom, who we know from our Discord server. They do a really nice job with live streams on Sundays talking about Lower Decks and whatever else is kind of happening in the world of Star Trek. I always enjoy their show. But there's tons of it out there. Lots of great content. Trek Geeks is always a good one too. Trek Geeks Bill, the other Bill, more famous Bill in the Trek community, I think maybe the Trek Twitter community, is just started a rewatch from the very, very beginning and is tweeting his journeys early in TOS.
Cool.
Nice. Always dig that. Seeing that episode by episode evaluation. So that's a welcome addition to my Twitter feed for sure. And lastly, I'll just, like we always kind of do, the Discord server for Trek Live is always a cool place to be. We have channels for watch logs where you share what you're watching in Star Trek at that time. We have a literature channel if you're reading a book and you want to share a recommendation or talk about something you've read. There are people in the server who are more expert than you or I, Dan, with the Star Trek literary universe. We have a couple members.
But we've got
of the
resources.
Server.
So.
We do who know the insides and outs of all of that.
Yep.
So if that's your thing, you can find people to connect with on that front on the Trek Live Discord server. It's a fun place to be, and hopefully, I think our coolest thing is Trek After Dark, which is our casual hangout that we do on occasion. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, we'll have one of those, and the easiest way to take part is to be a member of that Trek Live Discord server. That's where it takes place. We just hang out, we do trivia, we watch episodes as a group, and kind of just talk about life, talk about Star Trek, get to know each other, anything whatever we feel like. And it all happens on the Trek Live Discord server. So if you're interested in joining, becoming a crewman, crew member, you can send me a DM on Twitter, TrekFan4387, and I'll be happy to invite you and get you on board for that. So don't hesitate if you're curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's going to do it. It was fun, as always. To talk Star Trek, to talk Deanna Troi, to talk TNG, a little bit of Voyager, a little bit of Picard. And we will be back, I think, on Thursday, if all goes according to plan, for core setting. We'll have 2 new episodes of Lower Decks to talk about. Episodes 7 and 8 will be live probably around 8:30 Thursday night to share our thoughts there. And back again, hopefully, on Sunday for more Trek Live. So stay tuned to Twitter. On my feed, at least, I know I typically will share our topic of the week around Wednesday, Thursday for Trek Live. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll be back on Sunday.
Yep. Sounds good. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.